The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
It's going to be up to him. We're going to see what he has to say.
President Trump again pressing Putin for a ceasefire with Ukraine as U.S. sanctions loom against Russia. What he's now saying about a potential face-to-face meeting. Plus, a river of resources flowing in as part of President Trump's immigration crackdown, the aggressive new campaign to put more boots on the streets, and the Texas redistricting showdown escalates as a federal agency grants a request to track down Democratic lawmakers who left the state. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Gatton. We are glad you're here with us on this weekend edition. We take a look at the big headlines of the week and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the four big stories we've been following this week. Texas Democrats flee Texas to thwart Republicans trying to change the congressional map. The Trump administration's tariffs are now in effect, and Israel approves a plan to take over Gaza City. Plus, President Trump signing an executive order cracking down on debanking. Friday marked President Trump's deadline for Russian President Vladimir Putin to agree to peace in Ukraine or face new sanctions targeting Russia's main export, oil. As national correspondent Atra El-Nashar reports, Trump's next moves carry consequences not just for Ukraine, but for the credibility of the United States.
On the eve of President Trump's deadline for Russia to end its war, more than 100 Russian drones were launched on north-central regions of Ukraine, burning homes, injuring civilians, including a 16-year-old girl and an 80-year-old woman near Kyiv. Ukraine and NATO allies expecting consequences from Washington.
I certainly hope that President Trump will move forward with those sanctions.
Since Russia has managed to fund its brutal 3.5-year war in the face of Western sanctions as old as the war itself, Trump last month announced a plan to go after the Kremlin's top revenue source, oil and gas exports, by tariffing countries that buy them.
And they'll be at 100%. And that's the way it is. That can be more simple.
Before the deadline on Wednesday, the president added another 25% tariff on India, which gets about a third of its oil imports from Russia.
You're going to see a lot more.
So this is a taste of
You're going to see a lot more. You're going to see so much secondary sanctions.
The stakes of seeing that through, many argue, are exceptionally high.
The credibility of the president and the United States is at stake. Putin is simply stringing us along.
While all of this is going on, the White House and the Kremlin are working to set up a potential meeting of the two presidents. Trump's been encouraged to go into talks with Putin with new leverage of some kind, like fresh sanctions, because being strung along by Putin is a real concern, and Trump knows it.
President, in the past, you said you would know if Putin was tapping you along. What gives you any confidence that he is or isn't doing that this time around?
Can't answer the question yet. I'll tell you in a matter of weeks, maybe less. But we've made a lot of progress.
Progress, perhaps, but not yet peace. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Israel confirms it does indeed plan to take over Gaza City. Here, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's response when a Fox News reporter asked him about it.
We intend to, in order to assure our security, remove Hamas there, enable the population to be free of Gaza, and to pass it to civilian governance. That is not Hamas and not anyone advocating the destruction of Israel. That's what we want to do.
Netanyahu says Israel does not want to keep control of the enclave, rather maintain a security perimeter. Netanyahu said Israel wants to hand it over to Arab forces who will govern it properly without threatening Israelis and give Gazans a good life. Palestinians oppose this plan. The man accused of gunning down 2 Israeli embassy workers outside Washington, D.C.'s Capitol Jewish Museum earlier this year may face the death penalty.
Violence against anyone in this district will not be tolerated, especially violence which has hate at its core and is the genesis of violence.
31-year-old Elias Rodriguez is charged with 9 counts, including hate crime and murder in the killings of Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram. Rodriguez was reportedly heard shouting "Free Palestine" after he shot them. Prosecutors will have to prove he was motivated by anti-Semitism. Officials say a decision on whether to pursue the death penalty for Rodriguez has not been made. And President Trump nominates Stephen Miran to serve on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors on a temporary basis. Miran is the chair of the White House's Council of Economic Advisors. He'll fill the vacancy left by Adriana Kugler, a Biden appointee who announced her resignation last week. If approved by the Senate, Miran will serve out the rest of Kugler's term through the end of January. A judge rules construction on Florida's Alligator Alcatraz must stop for now as attorneys argue whether the facility violates environmental laws. Environmental groups and the Miccosukee tribe argue the project threatens wetlands and the protected plants and animals that live there. The judge says workers will not be allowed to add any new paving or infrastructure for the next 2 weeks. Under the ruling, the facility can continue to hold detainees. This comes as U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is in the midst of an aggressive recruitment campaign for new employees and agents. As the White House touts the results, critics decry the methods. Christine Frizzell brings us a glimpse of the clashes playing out nationwide.
The aggressive approach by Immigration and Customs Enforcement carries on, especially in so-called sanctuary cities like Los Angeles. This raid outside a Home Depot reportedly involved ICE agents hiding inside a truck before making arrests, according to witness accounts.
A Penske truck rolled up and was telling folks that they were looking for 10 hard workers. And as day laborers gathered up, they took advantage of that opportunity and they rolled up the truck, and ICE just started popping out and trying to gather as many individuals as they could.
These types of enforcement actions playing out nationwide, with top Trump border officials insisting they will continue.
The reason we're doing that, because if we don't, we send a message to the whole world. It's okay to cross the border illegally. It's a crime, but don't worry about it. As long as you don't commit another crime, there's no one looking for you. If that's the message we send to the whole world, you're never going to fix this issue.
Border Czar Tom Homan also pushing back against claims of inhumane conditions for migrants at Alligator Alcatraz in Florida, including reports of worms in their food and wastewater on the floor.
I walked through the detainee facilities, I walked through the medical facilities, I walked through the cafeteria. I had them show me, what did you feed these people today? I saw the lunch what they fed them. They ate better yesterday than I am eating today.
Meanwhile, in New York, 3 Democratic lawmakers were denied entrance at a Brooklyn detention facility for not following protocol. They argue they've been told migrants are being held in, quote, deplorable conditions.
And Section 527 allows us the oversight responsibilities to go in there and see what is going on.
As these clashes play out across the country, the effort by the Trump administration continues to grow. The new budget bill included $165 billion for immigration and border enforcement, $45 billion of which is slated specifically for the expansion of immigrant detention facilities.
Friday, President Trump hosted a ceremony for the signing of a peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The U.S. brokered deal helps end the decades-long conflict between the two countries, which have clashed over disputed territory since the late 80s. Both countries also signed agreements to pursue economic opportunities with the U.S. This is another in a series of peace agreements brokered by the White House since Trump took office for his second term. Also this week, the leader of Cambodia nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. The number of people applying for unemployment benefits edged up to 226,000 last week. That's according to the Labor Department. That's slightly more than analysts' expectation of 219,000, but still healthy. Overall, the number of Americans continuing to collect benefits increased by 38,000 to nearly 2 million the week of July 26. That's the highest level since November of 2021. New numbers paint a troubling picture for America's youngest working generation. Gen Z is racking up more debt than anyone before them, and many are running out of money before the month is even over. Let's go to Emma Witho from the Fact Check team, and I know that you looked into a number of factors behind this financial crunch, and inflation has got to be up there.
Yeah, it definitely is. A personal finance expert, they talked to Newsweek, and they said it's a combination of really everything. We're talking crushing student loan debt, sky-high rent, also inflation that doesn't seem to want to come down anytime soon, and then also jobs that just don't pay enough. A Newsweek Talker survey found Gen Z holds an average personal debt of $94,000. That's actually almost double what millennials carry, and so it's pretty bad.
It is, and to put this into perspective even further, on a monthly basis, what does the data show?
So a survey from this financial app called Step found that 41% of Gen Z runs out of money every single month, and only 22% consider themselves financially stable.
Oh, that is painful.
I know.
Emma, thank you so much. Later on, Emma will be back to break down other factors at play here that are causing this surge in debt among America's youth. Coming up next, the top U.S. health officials issuing a travel warning following a virus outbreak in parts of the world. And the redistricting fight in Texas gets even messier. Senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Hans von Spakovsky, details what's unique about the showdown in the Lone Star State. By the numbers, Americans are stressed about grocery costs. Nearly 90% are somewhat stressed about paying for groceries, according to a new Associated Press North poll. 4 in 10 adults under 45 years old use buy now, pay later services to afford groceries and restaurants. They also worry about housing costs and low bank balances. These numbers are similar to 2022, when former President Biden was in office. The U.S. trade deficit, that narrowed 16% in June from the month prior to more than $60 billion. As you can see right there, that's according to the Commerce Department. The trade gap with China also shrank to its lowest in more than than 21 years. June is the month higher tariffs kicked in. The declines in imported goods also came following months of American businesses stocking up on foreign goods in anticipation of these higher tariffs. Also, the redistricting battle taking place in Texas right now has turned into a political firestorm nationwide. Earlier this week, I spoke with senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Hans von Spakovsky, to break down the ongoing standoff in the Lone Star State.
It's great to see you again. Senator John Cornyn said today the FBI director has agreed to help track down Texas Democratic lawmakers who left the state. Why would the FBI be getting involved? On what grounds?
Well, because the law in Texas and the rules established by the House the last time Democrats ran out of the state, which was 2021, they put in rules making it a crime, in essence, for legislators to do that. They can issue arrest warrants, they can be fined $500 a day, and the FBI routinely helps states when they issue arrest warrants for any and all kinds of state and local crimes if that individual has absconded from the state. So the way to think about this isn't any different than if someone, robbed a bank or did something else. The state issued an arrest warrant and asked the FBI to help them find that particular fugitive. Yeah, it's a little bit different in state legislators, but there's nothing unusual about this.
The most recent case I can think of lawmakers boycotting a redistricting session was in Oregon, mostly Republicans in that case in 2021, Hans. What makes the Texas boycott different?
Well, the Texas boycott, I think, is different because of the fact that there are now rules and regulations in place saying they can't leave the state and abscond. But here's the other big difference. What Texas is doing is the result of a warning letter sent to them by the Department of Justice telling them that 4 of the congressional districts that they drew up in 2021 are unconstitutional racial gerrymanders. So in other words, they broke the law when they drew up those particular districts. That's all the result of a decision by the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals that happened at the end of last year. So the state is trying to correct an unlawful redistricting plan that the Justice Department has told them they have to do. That makes this very different. This isn't just political gerrymandering, which is what was going on in Oregon. This is trying to correct a violation of federal law.
The timing of it all is also interesting. You mentioned the DOJ. Amid the redistricting fight, there was also, as you know, a nationwide effort by the DOJ to clean voter rolls. How prevalent is election fraud, according to your research? And also, does the effort to clear these voter rolls, does that go far enough, in your opinion, to prevent it?
It's one of the biggest steps that needs to occur. There are many states that unfortunately do not do what they need to do to make sure that their voter rolls are accurate. And if you don't have accurate voter rolls, if you have people on there, for example, who have died or moved out of state, and you don't have, for example, ID requirements, which is like California, New York, and other states, it makes it easy to commit fraud. And how prevalent is it? Well, it happens often enough that we should be concerned about it, particularly because so many elections in this country are decided by a very small number of states. The election fraud database we maintain just broke 1,600 proven cases from across the country, and that's not even a comprehensive list. That's basically a sampling of cases we've been able to find.
And these are just 2 big political fights that we are watching ahead of the midterms, which will be here before you know it. Hans von Spakovsky, thank you for joining us tonight on the National News Desk.
Sure, thanks for having me.
In Florida, nearly 24 people, including 6 children, were infected with harmful bacteria linked to drinking raw milk. The state's health department says they drank unpasteurized milk from the same farm. 7 had to be hospitalized. Health officials say at least 2 cases are severe. In Florida, selling raw milk for human consumption is illegal. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is warning travelers about an outbreak of mosquito-borne chikungunya virus in China. Thousands of people in southeast China have been infected. The virus can cause fever and joint pain. The CDC issued a level 2 travel notice advising enhanced precautions like using insect repellent and wearing long sleeve shirts and pants. Globally, about 240,000 people have been infected since the start of the year. The CDC is urging travelers to get vaccinated. And we have some new information. Flint, Michigan residents say the water crisis isn't over, despite the city's safe declaration. The crisis began in 2014 with severe contamination of the city's drinking water, but residents told CNN the lifted emergency order is just the start. Last month, Michigan submitted a report stating it replaced 11,000 lead pipes and restored 28,000 damaged properties. Residents say the city needs to continue to test the water for safety. Officials say they're abiding by federal regulations. Coming up next here, the concerns raised by leaders in one state over President Trump's executive order on homelessness. Plus, what's behind an increase in people surrendering their pets to shelters? We're back in 90 seconds. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in California, where leaders react to President Trump's executive order on homelessness.
In a sweeping executive order, President Trump is calling for the homeless who also struggle with mental illness and addiction to be placed in institutions, and for funding to be pulled from harm reduction programs such as syringe access, naloxone distribution, and supervised injection programs. From the public health side, officials say the order may present logistical challenges, especially in rural areas where treatment options such as treatment beds and detox programs are already limited.
Statewide, there is a critical shortage of all of those things, and locally it's much worse than the statewide situation. So, we need many more resources to try and close those gaps. This executive order doesn't appear to create new resources.
Dogs like Zero are one of many pets being surrendered by their owner.
The majority of people who have a pet, they really don't want to surrender their animal.
The shelter seeing a 37% increase in pet surrenders. Financial pressure from rising costs is a big reason why.
Access to care is a big issue in animal welfare for dogs and cats. Access to veterinary care, access to food to feed your animals, access to apartment rentals that house animals, things like that. So really anywhere you go, there might be a barrier. Everybody's kind of in the same boat in that we're seeing inflation in different areas.
The shelter really tries to help pet owners from having to surrender their animals, but sometimes it isn't enough.
BC restaurants are closing at a rate of about nearly 2 per week, and boy, jobs are also being affected. A new report by the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington shows Full-service restaurant employment sharply fell between March and June, marking the largest drop in years. Much of the blame, they say, lies with Initiative 82. Under the law, base pay for tipped workers is rising year by year, making labor costs tougher to manage. Now, the D.C. Council has already stepped in, freezing the tipped wage at $10 an hour until next year and stretching out the timeline for full parity until 2034.
Coming up next, here are the best places to live according to a new study. The list of factors that go into play and how much money you'll need. And Major League Baseball breaking barriers this weekend. The umpire making her professional debut. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now, Hulu and Disney Plus are merging into one app starting next year. The announcement made Wednesday on an earnings call. Disney says the integration will make a more unified app experience. Also, Jen Powell is the first woman to umpire in Major League Baseball. The league says she will work the bases in a doubleheader on Saturday, and she'll be behind the plate calling balls and strikes Sunday. Apple announced it will invest another $100 million into the U.S. That's on top of the previously planned $500 million. Additionally, Apple unveiled an American manufacturing program. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Wednesday's Apple announcement is just one of nearly a dozen large investments businesses have made in the U.S. since March, most of them into technology. Here's 5 of them. NVIDIA said it plans to invest $500 billion over the next 4 years into AI infrastructure. Computer chip maker Micron is investing about $200 billion in manufacturing. IBM said it will invest $150 billion over 5 years into AI and quantum tech. Pharmaceutical company Roche is spending $50 billion over 5 years on expanding its drug production, and Amazon pledging $30 billion for data centers. All the investments total more than $1 trillion. The best areas to live in the U.S., according to Realtor.com, are located in the Northeast and Midwest. Economist Danielle Hale says this year's hottest zip codes list factors in affordability, lifestyle, and value. Across the 10 zip codes, the typical buyer's median household income is $114,000. Even in a tough market, Hale says, buyers won't compromise on value. The NFL banning teams from using smelling salts on game days. This following a 2024 Food and Drug Administration warning that the inhalants could mask concussion symptoms. San Francisco 49ers George Kittle announcing the ban in his opposition to it, saying he uses salts before every offensive drive. The prohibition won't prevent individual usage, but teams can't supply players with the substances. What's it like on Mars? 4 volunteer NASA crew members. They'll soon find out. NASA is preparing for its second Mars simulated mission, and the volunteers will spend a year in a 3D printed Mars habitat. They'll participate in simulated Mars walks, robotic operations, habitat maintenance, and exercise. It's a test to see if humans can deal with the conditions that could happen on the red planet, and will prepare humans for future missions to Mars. Tulsi Gabbard continues her pursuit of getting to the bottom of what she calls the Russia hoax, what the director of national intelligence is saying about a former president that sparked a grand jury investigation. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
The way you get your products will fundamentally change.
The U.S. seeking drone dominance, the proposed rule change that could dramatically alter our everyday lives. Plus, a federal judge deals the Trump administration a legal blow when it comes to diverting $4 billion in FEMA funds from a disaster program.
And either they're going to straighten their act out in the terms of government and in terms of protection, or we're going to have to federalize.
A Trump takeover of Washington, D.C., the alleged attack that has the president again considering doing just that. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for being with us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin with the Department of Transportation seeing a near future of Americans getting their packages and food deliveries, not from trucks, but from flying drones. National correspondent Matt Galka reports on the pitch.
The Department of Transportation hopes to have more drones in the air.
We are going to unleash American drone dominance,
with the hopes of making it easier to get deliveries from the machine straight to your door.
You may change the way you get your Amazon package. You may get a Starbucks cup of coffee from a drone. The way you get your products will fundamentally change.
Drones have been gaining traction with law enforcement, sometimes replacing first responders depending on the emergency.
Drones are saving lives, and they're doing that because it's transforming how responders respond to emergency calls dramatically.
Now commercial drones could be catching up. A proposed rule change has to do with regulations regarding lines of sight on drones. Current rules don't typically allow drones to fly out of sight from what's known as a visual observer monitoring the machines on the ground. Companies are granted exceptions in a case-by-case basis, but many believe the red tape is burdensome. Amazon has invested heavily in the use of drones as delivery vehicles, and founder Jeff Bezos has been talking about the technology becoming the norm for well over a decade.
These are effectively drones, but there's no reason that they can't be used as delivery vehicles. I know it can't be before 2015 because that's the earliest that we could get the rules from the FAA. My guess is that's probably a little optimistic.
The president signed an executive order in June directing the FAA to have a final drone rule by next year. Safety will be a chief concern, with the FAA dealing with outdated technology and reports of near misses with planes. Adding more drones could create more air traffic congestion.
We keep a keen eye on making sure that we can deploy drones and keep airplanes safe and keep them separated and make sure that, again, we allow the innovators to innovate. Because you go 10 years, you can't innovate any longer, and you're going to deploy someone else's drone technology into the U.S., and that's a huge problem.
Under the plan, flights couldn't occur any higher than 400 feet. Drones would need lighting and to be broadcasting remote IDs, and they'd have a weight limit around 1,300 pounds. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
President Trump signing an executive order this week formalizing debanking protections. It's an issue that conservatives and crypto industry advocates have been pushing for. A senior White House official says the order instructs regulators to review banks' past or current policies on restricting services. Major banks have repeatedly denied accusations that they have systemically targeted conservative groups, including the president. The spotlight is now on Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who is suggesting former President Obama orchestrated a hoax related to Russia's impact on the 2016 election. She was asked what her evidence is for suggesting Obama worked to show Russia and then presidential candidate Trump colluded. The DOJ is opening a grand jury probe into her allegation. Here's what she told Fox News regarding her evidence.
They were tasked to create an intelligence assessment that detailed how Moscow tried to influence the election, not if, but how. And this was the beginning of this manufactured intelligence assessment where they knowingly wrote things in this assessment that were false.
It is already established that Russia attempted to influence the results of that year's election. A GOP-led House investigation made that determination, as did a Senate probe led by then-Senator Marco Rubio. A federal judge blocked the Trump administration from reallocating $4 billion designated for natural disaster protection. 20 Democrat-led states brought the lawsuit, arguing FEMA doesn't have the authority to change its budget. The $4 billion is part of an infrastructure plan to help protect protect communities against natural disasters. Congress allocated money for the program. This week, the president honored the brave men and women of our armed forces who were wounded or made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Nearly 100 past recipients of the award were on hand for the National Purple Heart Day ceremony. The military award is given to veterans who were wounded or killed in combat.
It's always amazing, and you automatically bond with each other right away because you've been through the same situation, the same struggles, and you never met before, but you leave 5 minutes later like best friends.
The Purple Heart Medal is America's oldest military decoration. It was first awarded by President George Washington back in 1782. At least 3 people have died from an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in New York City. Cases have been reported all across 5 zip codes since late last month. The disease is a type of pneumonia caused by bacteria that grows in warm water. City health officials are continuing their investigation into the origin of the outbreak. The National Weather Service is rehiring up to 450 workers. This after the Department of Government Efficiency cut hundreds of employees earlier this year. The agency will hire critical workers like meteorologists and electronics technicians. The NWS is now exempt from a federal hiring freeze, which will last until mid-October. President Trump says the nation's capital needs new management. He's calling out recent violence in the city and making the case crime is out of control. National correspondent Christine Frizzell breaks down the numbers and brings us a closer look at how realistic a federal takeover actually is.
This was the scene in southeast Washington, D.C. earlier this week following yet another shooting.
It happened Friday night. Boom, 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 boom. They ain't hit nobody, but tape everywhere. It happened Saturday night. Boom, 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 retaliation.
Scenes like this providing fodder for former Fox News host turned U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro.
Our job is to get guns off the street, drugs off the street, take care of those individuals who are threatening, carjacking other people, and make this city safe and clean again. You don't buy into it, you're going to have to deal with us.
Us, it turns out, could be the federal government, which partially funds D.C. President Trump once again threatening to exert his powers and federalize the city, posting this picture of the former Doge employee Edward Korestein, who told police he was surrounded by 10 juveniles outside his car.
I have to say that somebody from Doge was very badly hurt last night. You saw that. A young man who was beat up by a bunch of thugs in D.C. And either they're going to straighten their act out in the terms of government and in terms of protection, or we're going to have to federalize and run it the way it's supposed to be run.
Elon Musk appears to agree. While D.C. crime rates have fluctuated, the homicide rate had been on a steady climb until 2024. And while it dropped about 32% from 2023 to 2024, experts say D.C. remains among the most dangerous cities in the country, with the 4th highest murder rate.
If you're not putting gun offenders in prison, you're going to have more gun offenders who commit murders. This is 8th grade logic.
A total federal takeover of D.C. would have to involve Congress overturning a 1973 law referred to as home rule, which is pretty unlikely. But there are other methods President Trump could employ, including the temporary takeover of D.C.'s police force and bringing up the National Guard without consent from local leaders. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
A new report shows Gen Z, those born between 1997 and 2012, they're struggling more than ever to make ends meet. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. I know you dug into the data, some persistent issues here. Tell us more.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty bleak when you actually see them laid out there. According to a recent survey from Step Financial, nearly 1 in 4 Gen Z adults say they've gone over a week without being able to afford either food or rent. Also, more than a third say they're going to end the month with less than $100 in their bank account.
And truly, when you look at the economic environment, I think, you know, for many, simply going to the grocery store can be painful, and that's just one factor.
Exactly. I mean, there's a number of things that are at play here. Experts told Newsweek it's a perfect storm, really. I mean, we have student debt that's up, wages really haven't kept up with inflation, also housing and healthcare costs are out of control, and even though unemployment's low, a lot of these entry-level jobs in the economy, they aren't offering any benefits and really financial security security. So it's a tough place to be in for a lot of these kids.
Right, and so what are experts saying is the solution? What can people do?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that people pointed out. One expert told Newsweek that we can't just wait on policy change. She says that Gen Z really needs better financial literacy tools right now, learning how to budget, avoiding being in debt traps, and also managing stress in the economy.
And that's so interesting that you mentioned financial literacy, because I know that there's a push even in the elementary school, and you know, starting really early on that. Emma, thank you so much. Thanks. For more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to their sources, just scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. Still to come, we continue our coverage of the Lone Star State showdown. We speak with one of the Democrats who fled the state as the FBI continues its search for the Texas lawmakers. Continuing our coverage of the Texas redistricting standoff, Governor Greg Abbott says no one is beyond the reach of Texas law enforcement. President Trump says Republicans are entitled to 5 more seats. Democrats, of course, disagree. This week, Angelo Brown spoke with one of the lawmakers who fled that state, Democrat Texas State Representative James Tallarico.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know you're in the middle of a lot of upheaval right here. Now, where exactly are you at right now?
I'm in the state of Illinois, the land of Lincoln, which is appropriate because Abraham Lincoln broke quorum when he was a state senator back in 1840 by jumping out of a window at the Illinois state capitol. Thankfully, I didn't have to jump out of any windows back in Texas. But we are participating in a long American tradition of standing up to bullies, of speaking truth to power, of civil disobedience, of good trouble.
Well, Representative Tallarico, Illinois, that's the one point of contention here. You have Donald Trump was asked about Texas redrawing their map, basically calling Texas Democrats at this point hypocrites because of where you are. I want you to take a listen and respond to this on the other side.
A lot of these states, you know, I watched this morning as Democrats are complaining, and they're complaining from states where they've done it, like in Illinois.
And that's a perfectly logical point there. You have Democrats, of course, aren't exactly innocent when it comes to gerrymandering. You're in Illinois, 2020, the 13th Congressional District was redrawn in a way that 538 called one of the worst gerrymandering in the country. What is your response to the president?
Well, it's not logical because we're not protesting just regular gerrymandering. Texas Republicans gerrymandered our state in 2021 at the beginning of the decade when they're supposed to redistrict. I voted against that rigged map, but I didn't break quorum. I'm breaking quorum with my colleagues now because Trump asked those same Republicans in Texas to redraw those Texas maps in the middle of the decade to give him 5 more seats so that he doesn't have to face accountability from the voters in the midterm elections because his policies have been so deeply unpopular. That's why this is different. And yes, gerrymandering is a problem in both political parties, in red states and blue states alike. It's wrong in all instances. It's why I've filed a bill in the Texas legislature to create a citizen-led, independent redistricting process so we can get the politics out of redistricting. But again, what's happening in Texas is at a whole nother level because it's at the request of the most powerful man in the country, and it's happening in the middle of the decade. It's kind of like 2 teams coming out of the locker room at halftime, and the team that's ahead says they want to change the rules in the second half to stay ahead. It's cheating. plain and simple, and Texans don't like cheaters.
Well, here's the deal. Since you're in Illinois, you're not able to vote on other issues. And one issue that's very close to a lot of residents in Texas is when it comes to flood relief and other things like that. By leaving the state, by breaking this quorum, do you think you could, and also in other ways, be hurting some of the residents of Texas because you can't vote on some of these other issues?
Well, the one who's hurting the people of Texas is Governor Abbott, because my colleagues and I showed up at the first day of this special legislative session 2 weeks ago, and we begged our Republican colleagues to prioritize flood victims and their families and disaster mitigation, and they refused to do so. In fact, they put those flood relief bills at the end of the agenda after this redistricting power grab, basically as leverage to try to get us to allow them to rig the upcoming 2026 elections. And so this is cynical politics at its worst, using flood victims, using a tragedy to do Donald Trump's bidding, to play politics. It's why people are fed up with politics as usual. And so we have called on Governor Abbott, we've called on our Republican colleagues to prioritize those flood victims. Let's get it done. Let's work across the aisle. Let's not play politics with these families.
Well, what about some harsh rhetoric coming from your side of the aisle? You have Jean Wu, the chair of the Texas House Democratic Caucus, basically called redistricting plan turbocharged racism, according to Reuters. And then you have Governor Greg Abbott, who says that's bogus. We have a small clip from Greg Abbott talking about this and how these districts would be divided up. Let's listen to that.
4 of the 5 districts we're drawing, they're going to be Hispanic districts. They happen to be Hispanic Republican districts.
Now, what is your take on that, especially when you look at the demographics in Texas right now? You have the Texas Tribune saying that in some cases, you're seeing the numbers, where Hispanic Texans are even a larger population than some white Texans. This, Abbott said, it's not about race, but about making it more fair, according to him.
Well, you know, I would say that the maps that they drew in 2021 are their maps. So this criticism of the current maps is a little silly because they're the ones who drew them, and they drew them just a few years ago. And so it's pretty clear what's happening. And Donald Trump has said it on the record, on camera, that they're doing this to get him 5 more seats because he feels like he's entitled to those seats. And I just have a fundamental disagreement with that, because no politician is entitled to any seat. These seats don't belong to us. They don't belong to Donald Trump. They belong to the people. And those people in Texas and across the country, they have a God-given right to elect the representatives of their choice in free and fair elections. And it's clear that what they're doing here is diluting the power of the people to be able to hold Donald Trump accountable. And so they're going to draw these districts into crazy shapes to guarantee the outcome they want. And that's cheating, plain and simple. And Texans don't like cheating in sports. We don't like cheating in our personal lives. And we certainly don't like cheating in politics.
Well, James Tellerico, state representative from Texas, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your position here.
Thank you for having me.
And to watch the full interview or follow along with the latest updates on the Texas redistricting battle, you can head on over to thenationaldesk.com. The Las Vegas Strip has unionized. The Culinary Workers Union, which represents 60,000 hospitality workers across the state of Nevada, now represents employees in all of Sin City's major casinos. Last year, the labor union finalized 5-year deals with holdouts. New contracts include a 32% gradual pay raise, guaranteed days off, and regular benefits. This as national union membership drops to a record low. This week, the NCAA shut down rumors of a possible expansion in their men's and women's March Madness tournaments for next year. The senior VP of basketball said the field for each tournament will remain at 68 teams, hinting at a possible expansion for 2027 and continue discussions over opportunities to add more teams in the future. New details. The State Department is launching a pilot program requiring some travelers entering the U.S. to pay a visa bond between $5,000 to $15,000. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the 12-month program is an effort to prevent people from overstaying their visas. Travelers can recoup their money after leaving the U.S. The program only applies to people from certain countries. Those countries that are part of the visa waiver program, like Canada and Mexico, will be exempt. Coming up, the impact of a newly approved next-gen warning system and what it would mean if another flooding disaster hits Texas. Then a father is facing charges after his 4-year-old shot his unsecure gun. The disturbing discoveries made at the man's house after his arrest. We'll be right back. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. And we start in Bexar County, Texas, where a new flood warning system has been approved.
Officials are calling the next-gen flood warning system a multi-pronged approach to improving flood readiness countywide.
The River Authority laid out its vision for this next-generation warning system at all the low water crossings across the city and the county. And we agreed 100% that this is the direction we need to go. It will immediately save lives in the next major weather event.
Though the Bexar County Regional Watershed Management Partnership, or BRWM, has invested more than $2 billion on flood mitigation, the new system is geared towards prevention and early notification, using real-time data from flood gauges to detect water levels at an estimated cost of $21 million.
44-year-old David Neff pleading not guilty to all 14 charges he currently faces in light of his 4-year-old getting a hold of his pistol and shooting his wife by accident while he was asleep on the couch. Neff claimed it was holstered on his waist. Detectives say he appeared to be on drugs when talking to him. And upon searching the home, they say they found what we now know to be 73 firearms within the residence, most of them easily accessible to the 4- and 9-year-olds in the house. And to the detective's surprise, over 10 homemade explosive devices. Prosecutors harping on the public safety threat in charging papers as well, showing this drawing with Neff's name on it that was found in the home, detailing what they say is a mass shooting of the community that he lives in.
Farmers across the Central Valley are in the middle of a not new but growing problem that they say is only getting worse. A rodent crisis from rats to squirrels and even gophers.
It's not affecting just the crop itself, but they're doing permanent damage to trees. They're going after the irrigation system. Numerous reports of them going after wiring on tractors and equipment and stuff to a much larger degree than we've ever seen.
To combat the problem, farmers have been relying on traps and pest control chemicals.
That we've learned through this situation, there's not one easy answer on this.
Still ahead here, coming up next, a mall staple goes bankrupt again. What this latest bout of financial trouble means for Claire's outlet stores nationwide. Plus, a promotional tour almost turns deadly for one NHL mascot, the uninvited guest who crashed the shoot and spooked the crew. President Donald Trump says his first paycheck went to the White House Historical Association to help with ongoing renovations. Trump is pushing multiple projects, including a Rose Garden update and building a ballroom. Trump claimed he was the only president other than George Washington to donate his salary, but former Presidents Herbert Hoover and John F. Kennedy did as well. Teen accessories chain Claire's files for bankruptcy. CEO Chris Kramer calls the move difficult but necessary, citing increased competition, the shift away from in-person retail and debt obligations. The company also relies on suppliers like China, which have been affected by Trump's tariffs. Kramer says stores will remain open as the company explores alternatives, including a possible sale. The Seattle Kraken hockey team and its mascot got quite a terrifying surprise during a trip to Alaska. All caught on camera. A grizzly bear charged at them during a fly fishing outing.
Hey Sam, we got a bear. We got to move down.
Oh my God.
Oh dear, that got pretty close as you look at that right there. The team in Anchorage for their annual community engagement trip. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time to check your local listings. And you can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.